Agit Moed, everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to the Shishi Shel Pesach Shir. The Baal Koire, I asked somebody to come lane, so I was wondering if afterwards you can make up the Kriyas HaTorah for Shishi, because it's Pesach Sheni, so you maybe have a second chance. But hopefully hopefully the first one was okay. Okay, we're all familiar that on the Yom Tov of Pesach it's different than the Yom Tov of Sukkot. On Sukkot we say Hallel Shalem all 8 days. On Pesach we only say Hallel Shalem the first day, and the Chutzar is the second day. But we don't say Hallel Shalem the remainder days. Let's start with the reason that most people are familiar with. The Shulchan Aruch Paskins in Siman Tav Tzadi, that on Chol HaMoed, and on the second days of Pesach, we say Hallel B'dilug. B'dilug means it's not really a Hallel. It's not really Hallel. Hallel is Hallel Shalem. Because there's a halacha, if you skip a word of Hallel, there's a question if you're Yotzei. There's even a question if you mispronounce. A guy says Eloi and then Ha. It's Ah. So if he mispronounces a word, there's a question, are you Yotzei Hallel? So if you skip, you're not really skipping means it's not really Hallel. On Rosh Chodesh, it's not really Hallel. Hallel on Rosh Chodesh is not really Hallel. It's by Sfardim, it's a question whether they make a bracha. Even for us, it's a question if you make a bracha. That's why the halacha is, it's a takana. Hallel on Rosh Chodesh is a takana. And therefore, there are many Rishonim that hold you only say it if you have a minyan. That's if you come late to Shul on Rosh Chodesh, and they're about to start Hallel, Me'ikar Adin, you have to start with them. Because if you don't start with them, it's a question whether you're even allowed to make a bracha in the first place. So why don't we say Hallel really on the last days of Pesach? So the Beis Yosef brings from Shibbolei Haleket, because the Mitzrayim drowned on Shvi'i Shel Pesach, and it says, B'nafal oyevecha al tismach. Don't rejoice when your enemies have a downfall. The Taz brings down slightly different. A few years ago, we were in the Ukraine, and we went to the kever of the Taz. Remember that? I don't think you'll forget that, yeah? So, we were at the kever of the Taz. The Taz says slightly different than the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef says, B'nafal oyevecha al tismach. The Taz says, Maseh yadai tovim b'yam v'atem oimrim shira. The famous words Hashem told the Malachim wanted to sing Shira, and Hashem said no. Maseh yadai tovim b'yam v'atem oimrim shira. So now the Taz is bothered. Fine, these are reasons only not to say Hallel on Shvi'i. What about Chol HaMoed? Says the Taz, it can't be you're goymer Hallel on Chol HaMoed and you're not goymer Hallel on Yom Tov proper. So therefore, Kal v'chomer, if you're not going to finish Hallel on Shvi'i, you're not going to say Hallel on Chol HaMoed either. Okay, that's the answer given in the Beis Yosef and the Taz, and that's what they teach in yeshiva, not in yeshiva. In elementary school, that's what they tell you. The problem is the Gemara says a completely different reason. What does the Gemara say? The Gemara in Erchen asks, the Gemara says that on Yud Amud Aleph, by the way, Stam, a good idea is, trivia question, where does Tosfos have a picture in Shas? You know this? Tosfos in Erchen Adav Tezvav, he has a picture of Kriyas Yamsuf. And Tosfos says, there's a kasha. How could it be? It says after they crossed the sea, Vayachanu al Yamsuf. They were camped by the Yamsuf. What do you mean they just crossed? So Tosfos in Erchen says, maybe we're going to talk about it. We'll see, tonight or tomorrow night. Tosfos says they did a semicircle and they came back around on the same side. So Tosfos on Tezvav has a picture of Kriyas Yamsuf. Okay, so if you want to know, what do I need to do tonight? You need to open up Tosfos at your Shabbos table and show your family Tosfos' picture. Tosfos, we were there also. Tosfos has a picture of Kriyas Yamsuf. It's okay to draw pictures, Tosfos has a picture. Anyway, back to Daf Yud, the Gemara says that Shmoina Asar Yomim Shehayachad Goymer Behenas Hallel. Shmoina Yimei Achag, 8 days of Sukkos, Ushmoina Yimei Chanukah. By the way, the Rekeach writes in Parshas Emor, first in the Torah is the Yom Tov of Sukkos, followed by the mitzvah of lighting the menorah. The Rekeach says it's to teach that just like we say Hallel Shalem on Sukkos, we also say Hallel Shalem on Chanukah. The Yom Tov Harishon Shel Pesach, the Yom Tov Shel Atzeres, and in Golos 21 days. 9 days of Sukkos, 8 days of Chanukah, 2 days of Pesach, 2 days of Yeshuos. Frak the Gemara, Ma'ishna b'chag da'amrinan kol yoyma, u'ma'ishna b'pesach d'lo yamrinan kol yoyma. Yeah, you know that question? Naftali. You get the question? You don't know, you know that question in Erchin, right? That why is it that on the 8 days of Sukkot we say Hallel, and Pesach we don't say Hallel? Says the Gemara, listen carefully, Kol Yom Chag Chalukin b'Karbanos. The 8 days of Sukkot, they have different karbanos. We're poiches v'hoilech. We go down, 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 down. The Pesach in Chalukin b'Karbanos. But on Pesach, we are not Chaluk in our karbanos. Maybe on Pesach, we bring the same carbon every single day. So you know the epic chiddush of Ka'ila, you know my epic chiddush of Ka'ila. That why in other shuls do people chime in when the Bakari says Ka'ila, everybody is mafsik and says it, even though you're not allowed to, because they can't help themselves. Why? Because on Sukkot, it's different karbanos every day. We go down, down, down. But we know a yid always says, malim b'kodesh. Like we do on Pesach, we're in moiridin. We bring karbanos on the first day, and on the other days it's ka'ela, the same thing. And my friend Chaim Davidowitz pointed out that the trup of ka'ela is also, it goes up. It's, ka'ela is to indicate where in the Torah do we have a remez to malim b'kodesh ein moiridin, other than Ka'ila. So therefore everybody shouts it out, even though you're not allowed to. So, okay, so listen very carefully. On Sukkot, it's the same carbon every day. Therefore, we say Hallel. On Pesach, on Sukkot, it's a different carbon every day. Therefore, we say Hallel each day. On Pesach, it's the same carbon every day. Therefore, we do not say Hallel. Let's think about that. Why does the fact that we bring the same carbon every day mean that we shouldn't say Hallel? Why does that mean we shouldn't say Hallel? It seems like maybe one way to understand it is, if it's a different carbon every day, that means it's a different Yom Tif every day. The carbon creates a new Chag, therefore you have to say Hallel. On Pesach, it's the same carbon, then we don't say Hallel. Fine. So what's the $1 million question? The Gemara not the Gemara. The Taz and the Beis Yosef contradicts the Gemara. Because why does the Taz and the Beis Yosef have to say, our enemies are suffering, therefore we shouldn't say Hallel? It's a nice svara. It's a nice feeling. It's a nice sensitivity. The only thing is, the Gemara says something else. The Gemara says because it's the same carbon every day. Get the question? The Achroinim are so the Gemara. So there's an Achroin. His name is Yeshuos Yaakov. He's buried in the Ukraine, in the same matzeva as the Taz. We were there. The Yeshuos Yaakov asked this kasha. By the way, Rav Aaron Koller in the Mishnah, Rav Aaron also asked this kasha, that the Achroinim are a stira to the Gemara. Yehuda looks like he has an answer up his sleeve. Not yet. So they say like this, an amazing answer. They say it's a mevuar that there are two sibois of saying Hallel. You could say Hallel because of Yom Tif, and you could say Hallel because of a miracle. Each one of these two factors would obligate a Hallel. The Kedushas Hayoim of Yom Tif, or the commemoration of a miracle. The Gemara is addressing why doesn't the Yom Tif obligate a Hallel? It's Pesach. Why don't we say Hallel each day of Pesach? The answer is no. It's not a Yom Tif. It's not a new Yom Tif. How do we know it's not a new Yom Tif? We know it's not a new Yom Tif because we bring the same karbanos as we brought the first day. So Alts Yom Tif you don't say Hallel. But what the Beis Yosef and the Taz want to know is why doesn't the miracle of Kriyas Yam Suf, why doesn't that obligate a Hallel? Now that's a legend there. This is like an epic breakthrough. Epic is a very yeshivish word. Now, everything is epic. Okay, just pointing out. But it is an epic breakthrough. Why? Because that means every time you say Hallel, you need to try to identify why are we saying Hallel? Are we saying Hallel because of the Yom Tif, or are we saying Hallel because of the miracle? For instance, on Chanukah, why do we say Hallel on Chanukah? Is Chanukah a Yom Tif? Listen, the Gemara says, B'shana acheres, kavim asalam, Yamim toivim b'Hallel v'Haida. Were they koived a Yom Tif to say Hallel, or is it a Hallel for the miracle, maybe of the Neiros or of the military victory? There's always going to be a question now. Why are we saying Hallel? And another thing is, we have to understand: should women say Hallel? Do women have to say Hallel because of a miracle? Maybe yeah, because Afhin Hayu Ba'isei Hanes. Do they have to say Hallel al Yom Tiv? Maybe not. Maybe then it's a Zman Grama. Okay, so this is the Chiddush of the Yeshuos Yaakov. That the Gemara is addressing why doesn't the Yom Tiv obligate us in Hallel, and the Beis Yosef and the Taz are addressing why doesn't the miracle obligate us in Hallel. Fine. So now, in your honor, this morning, I had a Chiddush to answer the Emek Bracha's question. Let's see if it works. Okay? The Emek Bracha is a Talmud of the Brisker Rav. This is like big time yeshiva should say, right? Especially, look, the one on Zram, Torah Zram is like, but you know, we're not learning Zram now, but it's Pesach. But to do Emek Bracha, okay, fine. The Emek Bracha quotes a Medrash Tadshe. It's a type of Medrash. Says the Emek Bracha, Zayin Mayadois Hein. There's 7 Yomim Tovim. Shabbos, Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaOmer, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaShofaros, Chag Yom HaKippurim, V'Chag HaSukkos. Okay, that's the Medrash. So, Frek the Emek Bracha, why does it count Chag HaMatzos and Chag HaOmer separately? What's Chag HaOmer? The Omer is brought on the second day of Pesach. That's a new Yom Tif. The second day of Pesach is a new Yom Tif. How is the second day of Pesach a new Yom Tif? Says the Emek Bracha, because what do we learn from Erechin? That when you bring a new carbon, it becomes a new Yom Tif. The Haraya, each day of Sukkot is a new Yom Tif because you bring different carbonos. But each day of Pesach is the same Yom Tif because it's the same carbon. But from this Gemara we learn a Yesod that when you bring different carbonos, it's a new Yom Tif. We actually bring a new carbon on the second day of Pesach. You know which carbon? The carbon Omer. The carbon Omer triggers Sfiras Omer. By the way, you know the Rambam holds, contradistinction to almost all the Rishonim, the Rambam holds Sfiras Dairaisa. So the question is, why does the Rambam hold Sfiras Omer as Dairaisa? Maybe the Rambam holds it's not connected to the Hakravas HaKarbon. You see, if it would be connected to the Hakravas HaKarbon, we don't have the carbon, so how could counting be Dairaisa? So some want to say, well, the Rambam holds it's not connected to Hakravas HaKarbon. The thing is, it is connected to Hakravas HaKarbon because the Rambam only discusses the mitzvah of counting in Hilchos Tamidim U'Musafim, not in Hilchos Pesach, which means it is totally on the Hakravas HaKarbon. So how could the Rambam hold that Sfiras Dairaisa? So the Brisker Rav in his Chidushim HaMenachos, it's an obscure place. He says the Rambam holds it is dependent on the carbon, but it's not dependent on actually bringing the carbon. It's dependent on the possibility of being able to bring a carbon. And the Rambam Shita is makrivin kol hakarbonos kulam afal pi she'ein abayis banoi. According to the Rambam, you're allowed to bring all the carbonos today. Why don't we? For side reasons. We don't know the exact makam hamizbeach and so forth. But fundamentally, you're allowed to bring the carbonos. Mamela sfira is still dairaisa. You bring a carbon on the second day of Omer. What's the carbon? The carbon ha'omer on the second day of Pesach. Memela says the Emek Bracha, when the Medrash says Chag ha'matzos, Chag ha'omer, there's the Yom Tif of Pesach, and there's the Yom Tif of the second day of Pesach. Why? Because you bring a carbon on that day. What carbon? The carbon ha'omer. It shafts a new Yom Tif. It creates a new reality of Yom Tif. What's the Yom Tif? What's the Yom Tif? Chag ha'omer. Why is it a Yom Tif? What reflects that it's a Yom Tif? A new carbon. Frak the Emek Bracha. So you should say Hallel on the second day of Pesach. So you say we do. No, we don't. We only do because of Sveika the Yoma. In Eretz Yisrael, they don't. So you should say Hallel Shalem on the second day of Pesach. Why? Chag ha'omer. But it's not a new Yom Tif. You bet it is. You bring a new carbon. That's the question of the Emek Bracha. What does he say? Tzarchian. Okay, so my Emek Bracha, I wrote an answer. It's going to be in the new Sefer on Lag BaOmer in English. But this morning I thought of maybe a better answer or a better way to say it. Okay, let's learn a few more lines in the Gemara in Erechin. The Gemara asks, why don't you say Hallel on Shabbos? You bring a new carbon. Raise your hand if you say Hallel on Shabbos. Good. Why not? Ask the Gemara. Shabbos, the chalukah b'karban asel lema, says the Gemara, yeah, very nice, but loy ikri moyed. You bring a new carbon, but it's not called a moyed. In fact, the Gemara, Rosh Chodesh, the ikri moyed lema, but Rosh Chodesh is called a moyed. Where is it called a moyed? It says in Eicha, kara alai moyed. And the Gemara says, talking about Rosh Chodesh, says the Gemara, loy ikdish ba'asiyas malacha. It's not sanctified with asiyas malacha. Dichsiv, hashir yeh lochem kelel hiskadesh chag. Now, I think off the bat, we should have an answer of why we don't say Hallel on the second day of Pesach. Is the second day of Pesach ikdish ba'asiyas malacha? It is. You now do malacha on Chol Hamoed. The Gemara never said, oh, you can't say Hallel on Chol Hamoed because you're allowed to do malacha. The Gemara understands, midairaisa, you're now to do malacha unless it's davar avid. So Chol Hamoed is ikdash b'asiyas malacha. Is it called a moyed? It seems like it is called a moyed. But what about Chag HaOmer? So I would say that the Chag HaOmer is not a moyed. But it's Pesach. No, als Pesach, it wouldn't be mechayiv a carbon. It wouldn't be mechayiv a Hallel because it's not cholak b'karban oiseyan. Now what? You want to say it is cholak b'karban oiseyan because of the carbon oimer, but that doesn't make it a moyed for that reason. Okay, let me explain better. There's a Mishnah Megillah on Adaf Lamed Amud Beis. What's the Kriyas HaTorah on Pesach? Who knows? What's the Kriyas HaTorah on Pesach? On the first day, what do we lein? On the first day of Pesach. On the first day, okay. What do we lay? So the Mishnah says, you know what we lay on Pesach? Pesach koirin beparshas mayadois shel taras kainim. That's sharoi kesavayis ki valid. It's very interesting. What do I lay on the second day? And what do I lay on Chol Hamoed? And what do I lay on each subsequent day? The Mishnah doesn't say a word. Then it says, Ba'atzeres, Shiva Shavuos Tisra Rosh Hashanah, Ba'chodesh HaShvi'i, on Yom Kippur, Acharei Mois. Listen to this. B'Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag, Koirin beParshas Mayadois Shebataras Kohanim, which is Sha'ir Oikes Avayez Ki Valed, Uveshar Kol Yemois HaChag, beKarbanos HaChag. So all of a sudden, when it comes to Sukkos, the Mishnah tells us what I lay on each day. Why would the Mishnah tell me what I lay on each day of Sukkot and not on what I lay on each day of Pesach? Isn't that interesting? By the way, Rashi says, Uviyoyma kama mayri. On Pesach, it's talking about the first day. Ubebraisa amrinan ba. Later on, in Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph, it's going to say, Shar kol yemois haPesach melakit v'korei me'inyanoi shel Pesach. The rest of Pesach, we lane on each day different inyanim. Some days we lane kol habecha. Some day we lane like we did vayidaber arzina. Right? Every day we lane something else. Im kesav talves ami. It's amazing. The Mishnah only says what to read on each day of Sukkot. It does not say what to read on each day of Pesach. So Rashi says basically, shayer. Umad shayer b'mas nisin tana b'braisa. So later on, the Gemara says, Tan Rabbanan bePesach koyen beParshas Mayadois umaftir bePesach Gilgal. Says the Gemara, v'ha'inna diika trei yoyma yoyma kama bePesach Gilgal ulamachar bePesach Yoshiyahu ushar yemois haPesach malakit v'korem inyan shel Pesach. My hai amra papa mapu siman. Mapu. You know that siman? I know you don't know what a map is, but do you know what mapu is? Mapu mishchu kachu. Aleph im kesav talve, pei psalacha, vav vayidaber. Isn't that interesting? That legabe the Yom Tov of Pesach, it's ton of a shire. Is this a classic ton of a shire that the Mishnah just doesn't say anything? Why would it leave out Pesach and not put in? Why would it leave out Pesach and yes, put in Sukkot? So I heard this many years ago from, in the name of Rabbi Glatstein, the Mishnah Seivitz. I saw last night, actually I saw this morning, from Reb Shlomo Warman. An amazing pshat. What's pshat in Erchin? Because you bring the same carbon every day, it's not a Yom Tif? Bringing carbonos makes it a Yom Tif? The reason why it's a good day, the reason why it's a festive day is because you bring a carbon? The carbon makes it a Yom Tif? That's what a Yom Tif is? A day that we slaughter animals? Why are you wearing nice clothing today? Why are you wearing new clothing? Why are you having a Suda? Because in the temple they killed animals. That's what you're happy about? The pshat can't be you bring a carbon, it makes it a Yom Tif. Bringing a carbon is reflective that it is a Yom Tif. Says Rabbi Glatstein, says Rav Shlomo Mormon, if you bring the same carbon every day, that means, you know how you look at the Yom Tif of Pesach? It's a one Yom Tif of 7 days. How do we know it's one Yom Tif of 7 days? Because you bring the same carbon every day. It's not that the carbon makes it a Yom Tif, it's that the carbonos are symptomatic. It's not a Siba. Yeah, this is classic Siba Simon. It's a Simon, it's a Yom Tif. It's reflective that it's a Yom Tif. And if you bring the same carbonos every day, it means Pesach is one long Yom Tif. Sukkot, it's a Yom Tif, each day is a new Yom Tif. How do we know it's a new Yom Tif every day? The fact we bring different carbonos every day shows it's a new Yom Tif. Therefore, Rabbi Warman says, the Mishnah is talking about what we're obligated to read mid'oraisa al tzvayedaber Moshe Mayadei Hashem el bnei Yisrael. You know what you're obligated to learn mid'oraisa? On Sukkot, you're obligated to read each day a new Kriyas HaTorah. Why? Because since Moshe was masakin, that on a Yom Tif you need to learn the Torah, on Sukkot, where each day it's a new Yom Tif, you need to read a new Kriyas HaTorah daily. Ma'ashein kein on Pesach, als the din da'oraisa vayedaber Moshe Mayadei Hashem el bnei Yisrael, you only have to learn on the first day. You don't have to learn on each subsequent day. So why do we learn today? It's a later D'Rabbanan. It's not me'ikar hadin, it's not me'ikar takanas Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, from the Mishnah, we see the pshat in the Gemara in Erchin. The fact that the Mishnah only tells us about the Kriyas HaTorah on Sukkot, and it doesn't tell us about each day's Kriyas HaTorah on Pesach, and the later Gemara and Abraisa explains it, that means the pshat in Erchin is that if there are different carbonos, if the same carbon every day, Pesach is a one chunk of Yom Tif, a 7-day Yom Tif. You know why we don't say Hallel outs the Yom Tif? Because we did already on the first day. So let's come back to the Emek Bracha's question. This is what I thought this morning. That according to this Hezber in the Gemara in Erchin, where the reason we say one Hallel on Pesach is because Pesach is one Yom Tif of 7 days. How do we know that? Because it's the same carbon every day. Now what do you want to ask? You want us to say Hallel on the second day of Pesach? Why? Oh, because you bring a carbon. Whoever told you that bringing a carbon is Mechayev Hallel? Bring a carbon is not Mechayev Hallel. Yom Tif is Mechayev Hallel. The only thing is, Pesach is one long Yom Tif. The proof being, because it's the same carbon every day. Oh no, it's not the same carbon on the second day. Yeah, so you're bringing me a carbon from outer space, a left field, the carbon Omer, and you're saying, you should say Hallel. Why? Because there's a new carbon. Okay? But that new carbon doesn't make a Yom Tif. That new carbon, is that new carbon symptomatic that it's a Moyed? Or there happens to be a mitzvah called Sfiras HaOmer that gets kicked off by bringing a carbon. So I should say Hallel now? Nobody ever said, there's no source that when you slaughter an animal, you have to say Hallel. There's no makar that when you shecht an animal, you have to say Hallel. The makar is, on Yom Tif you say Hallel. The only thing is, should we say Hallel every day? Well, only if it's a new Yom Tif every day. Well, how do I know if it's a new Yom Tif every day? If it's a different carbon every day for that Yom Tif, it means it's a new carbon every day. So I bring the same carbon every day. Yeah, but on the second day I have carbon ha'omer. That's great. So what do you want me to do? Because we bring a carbon ha'omer. Does that carbon ha'omer say that there's a new Yom Tif today? It's only when it is a Yom Tif and you want to know, is it 7 different Yom Tovim or one long Yom Tif, the way the carbon is brought will indicate whether it's a new Yom Tif or not. But nobody ever said that on a day that you bring a carbon, it becomes a Yom Tif. Not Pashut. It's not Pashut, I'll tell you why. Because if you look in Parshas Emor, in Parshas Emor, which is the Parsha of the Moyadim, but not the Parsha of the Karbanos. Pinchas tells you about the Karbanos, Emor tells you about the mitzvahs. It says that on Pesach, you should bring a carbon for 7 days. So the Sforno asks, wrong Parsha, it should be in Pinchas. Why are you telling me in Emor that you bring a carbon for 7 days? So the Sforno says, because you might be wondering, why is Chol HaMoyed mentioned in Emor, but it's not a Yom Tif? Answer is, since you're bringing karbanos, that reflects it is a Yom Tif. So you see that bringing a carbon reflects that it's a Yom Tif. But it reflects it's a Yom Tif, but it doesn't necessarily reflect it's a new Yom Tif. So should we say the same thing about the carbon ha'omer? That's the Emek Bracha's kasha. The Emek Bracha wants to say that the fact that you bring a carbon ha'omer, that means the Medrash calls it a chag. The Medrash calls it a chag, but it might not be. But the Gemara does say you need a chag that's aser b'malacha. The chag of the omer doesn't aser b'malacha. The chol hamoed asers b'malacha. The carbon ha'omer does not reflect the day that asers b'asiyas malacha. In any event, this is some of the Lomdus on Amiras Hallel, on Yom Tov of Pesach, and on other days. And it's always important to know, are we saying Hallel for the Yom Tif, are we saying Hallel for the miracle, or possibly for both? And it brings up this interesting question about the second day of Pesach. By the way, it would then explain why in Parshas Emor we have all the days of Sfira are in Parshas Emor. What are all the days of Sfira in Parshas Emor for? Parshas Emor is the Parsha of the Moyadim. Are the days of Sfira so Emor a Yom Tif? But if you say, like the Shita of the Rambam, that the first day you bring the Omer, and each day you count is a hemshech of the carbon. So really, it's one long moyed, starting from Pesach. We know the famous Ramban, that the days of Sfira are like the Chol HaMoed between Pesach and Shavuos. So now we understand why the subject of Sfira so Omer is in Parshas Emor, because this whole Zman is a Zman of moyed. Wishing everyone a good moyed. Shkayach.